are having to run countywide. This is a person who spent less than $3,000, reported every dollar, and came within 2% of the plurality of the incumbent, and still was not elected, mainly because of the other areas. When you look at North Charleston, you see the same thing. Between Miss Lucas, Linda Lucas, and Ms. Pettigrew, Vivian Pettigrew, almost 64% of the vote there. Ms. Bonecoat's 37%. Less than 10,000 votes cast. And that's important. And it's important because of this. I believe in qualified people holding office. And I've disagreed with some people around this table on candidates at certain times, but I believe that people that serve on school board, if you have the choice between an educator and a non-educator, we should pick the educator. Because they know, what is happening in our schools. When you have a choice between a parent and a non-parent with kids in public schools, you should pick the parent, okay? People that actually have skin in the game, that know what's going on. And in this case, you can just see that. By the way, and this is interesting, I like this. So in the North Charleston race, Cindy Bonecoats, who was the incumbent, reported spending $0 as well. I don't know if you saw the TV ads, I did. Miss Lucas reported spending $4,113.70, all of which she raised from individual contributions, most of which were less than $100 in the district. And Miss Pettigrew spent $3,405.60, most of which were $100 or less contributions from within the area from which she was running, from her neighbors, okay? So talk about, and again, I'm not against all incumbents, but I just want to point out, when we have people spending $0 and winning by pluralities, and they've been in office so long, we have to look at that as, are these people really representative of the neighbors? So let's talk about East Cooper, which is the most, to me, infuriating in a way. Mr. Rambo, who is an educator, who has kids in the public schools, meets both of my criteria for being qualified for school board, actually got the most votes east of the Cooper. Got 33.2% of the votes if you go all the way from Allendale, all the way down to the Old Village. Everything east of Cooper, if you include everything. And by the way, Miss Green won big in Allendale and McClellanville, okay? He got 33.2% of the vote. Miss Darby, who is the current chair of the school board, got 32% of the vote. And Miss Green, who is serving on the school board now because she won countywide, got 20%, okay? He beat her by 13% in the district that they are representing. And so I point that out, and when we look at the expenditures there, that you want to know who spent the least amount of money that they reported? Anybody want to guess?
Darby.
Correct. She reported that she spent about $3,000. Ms. Green reported about $8,000, and Mr. Rambo spent about $12,000. Okay, but he won the district he's representing. And when we look at city council and county council, we have two choices. We have a majority system or a plurality system. In South Carolina, we've chosen a majority system, which means you got to get 50 plus 1 to win. And if that means you have to have a runoff, you have to have a runoff. What we know based on these facts and statistics is that none of the people that are currently serving on our school board that were just elected would be serving if they were held to the same standards, the same single member districts that we have on city council and that we have on county council. And so that's a problem. And so, I think single member districts are the way to go. I don't know why nobody has ever looked at school board in that way. If we had changed this year and gone on a plurality scale, it would not have changed any race except that East Cooper race. We would have Mr. Rambo instead of Miss Green. And so I think it's a really ripe opportunity for us to push for that and advocate for that, because the incumbents would still have a chance to win. They got the most votes in a plurality. But when you look at the challengers overall, I think it would be a competitive race, and we could actually talk about our school district. And I'll just say in conclusion that, my personal opinion is who serves on the county school board, while important, is kind of small beans in the large scheme of things, because basically they're deciding how to allocate the crumbs. the fact is, at the state level, we underfund education. We have a governor who doesn't value education. We have a state legislature who doesn't value public education because all of their kids are in private school. And it's great that they can afford it. It's great for the folks that can afford it. But it's a really disservice to the kids who have no opportunity and no choice about what their parents can afford. And so while we can change the school board, and I think we should go to single member districts, we really also have to focus on the macro picture, which is making sure education is a priority. There's some people in this room that ran on that platform and got really close this time, and we got to make sure we keep supporting them and make sure that we get them in the state legislature and try to change the state. And we just have to keep working at it.
That's good. That's really informative. I don't know, we'll have to look at how we can get the public engaged in this single member districts. But these statistics are really telling. We have to get a statistician. I know Dr. I hate to use it, from Columbia, Dr. Rook from Columbia, he's a statistician. And we'll talk with him to see whether or not he can look at some lines and how this is the beginning stage.
I was just going to ask, like, what would be the process to become a single member district?
Does there need to be a lawsuit like they did with county
Well,
council,
yeah, so
or
that's-
I don't know.
State legislature.
Yeah, so there's really two ways. I mean, the best and easiest way is for the legislature to do it. There is a lot of reason for them not to do it because, I mean, think about this. So a teacher who we pay like paupers, who, in my opinion, do the Lord's work, and really do the hardest work in the community, and we pay them like paupers and peasants, and they want to run for school board, which is an extra thing, which we pay $13 a meeting or something like that. Some de minimis amount. Right, whatever it is, it doesn't pay the parking garage fee, right? They either have to raise the money to run countywide, which, by the way, to run a real countywide race is at least a six-figure race, or put up the money themselves, which we don't pay them to have. How could they ever do it? They can't. And so the moneyed interest will always have an advantage in these races. And so the two ways we do it, the legislature is the easiest way, but I don't know that the legislature has an incentive, because guess what? It's up to the county school boards to demand more of the legislature. And the legislature right now is ignoring the Supreme Court opinion that's been out there for many years about saying they're underfunding education, saying they're engaging in segregationist tactics, and they haven't done anything to change it, and they don't want to do anything to change it, and they won't have to do anything to change it as long as the county school boards across the state don't demand it and the people don't demand it. And guess what? The county school boards are the representative of the people when it comes to education. So it's very easy for them to say, well, the county school board says everything is, okay, everything is kosher, there's nothing we need to do. So that's the first way and the easiest way. The second way is the way we did it with city council and county council, which is a lawsuit. And you basically just say that we're being deprived, people are being deprived of their, constitutional rights and going through that process. I really do think, though, given these statistics and the fact that the incumbents actually did win in plurality in all but one of the races, they really, should be willing to come to the table and say single-member districts make sense. It's complicated by the fact that, at least 3 of them have reported spending $0. So, they don't envision it as them having to spend money to run countywide. But the fact is that, they have, even though it wasn't their money they raised.
Can I ask a question? Besides accountability, what is, and I understand accountability, and I think it's very important. What are other benefits from having the, this single,
Well, I think, and you serve on a constituent school
Right.
board, which is a district, which is a district elected board, right? There's not a countywide election for that. You're elected from the district that you serve, and I think part of that is the accountability of your neighbors knowing who you are. But it's also the possibility of holding office. It's very expensive to run countywide, okay, and to run a competitive race. Almost anybody can put their name in the hat, can run in a small primary or can run in a small school board, election. But to actually be competitive, you either have to raise a lot of money or put a lot of money in. those are the facts, and it's an unfortunate fact, but it's a reality. And educators who were already asking to work, 40-hour weeks and then 20 hours on top of that grading papers, and then 10 hours on top of that waiting tables so that they can buy the school supplies that we expect them to have for their classroom, do not have time, to run for office.
So in addition to accountability, it's also raised the quality of
Right.
the board members?
Yeah, I think that goes back to ensuring diverse representation, and so every community being represented by someone of their community versus someone who just necessarily, lives there. Getting an educator on the school board is very difficult. I mean, look at our school board now. You know how many educators we have on our school board? One.
So sad.
That's an outrage. I mean, it really is an outrage.
Not right.
Kevin?
Well, I don't want to get hunkered down on this thing about educator, not educator. I'm a college grad.
Right.
I have my master's. I have 6 hours toward the PhD. It's common sense on the board. Most of the people that you have on the board don't just have a high school diploma. And that's why I think you need to put the separation between what qualifies for the board and what doesn't qualify for the board. But the biggest problem, I think, that we see here, when I ran my race, I ran a county-wide race. And let's just be honest about it. I ran from one end of the county to the next. My name was popularly known amongst my African Americans, my ministers and so forth, so I ran. The problem I saw, two problems I saw with this particular race. One, the coalition spent about $700,000 in marketing for these candidates. The other thing is the candidates that were fielding into the race did not listen when we kept telling them how to campaign for this race. I can name all four. Did not campaign. If you don't get out there on a Sunday afternoon and go visit a church in Eastover, Edisto Island, and the next Sunday go visit another church and take your time and work the grid, it is not going to happen. You have to get yourself familiar with those pastors, those community leaders across the county, and you have to get to know them and listen to their concerns. I did a grassroots campaign. I think I spent about $3,000 to $4,000, but I did a grassroots campaign. The biggest problem that we have now is we got another election coming up in 2020. That board is nothing to play with. I'm just being quite honest with you. I sit there and shake my head every day. I can't tell you that you need an educator. I think you need someone with common sense. They're not going to be, I just did an interview with Channel 5 today. You're not going to be, we're not going to gain anything if one, the money's not spent in the right way, that we have an organization that's top heavy and spends top heavy. We have an organization that doesn't believe in giving teachers rights, doesn't believe in giving students more content hours. Those are some of the basic things that we can work in our community to bring about better scores. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. It took me a year of scrapping, and then I come from a late wife that's an educator, a teacher. My sister was a principal. Most of my family's educators. So it doesn't take a lot to figure it out. You have to figure out the person that you elect in that seat is strong enough to fight for your community. If that person doesn't have a spine and doesn't know how to stand, then you're just pissing in the darn wind. I was being honest. Because I see people up there now, look, one person, West Ashley, she went in the black community. Oh, they welcomed her. She ran and she said she was going to help our community. When it came down for controversial votes that would have helped that community out, she bailed. You have to know the individual that you're putting in the race. If that person is not strong.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly right, Kevin. In single-member districts, it's a lot easier. And I followed your race closely, and you did run a grassroots campaign. You had bipartisan support, Republicans, Democrats across the board, as it should be. It should not be a partisan situation. You also, in that particular year, that particular race, we didn't have a $700,000 slate of candidates running against you. And, your hard work paid off. But if this is the new norm, if the new norm is $500,000 in a county school board race, we can run grassroots campaigns all day, every day, but unless we can be everywhere,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Well, they
difficult.
spent more money than a congressional race.
I know.
So you need to ask the question in this room, and I'm not the enemy of anybody in this room, I'm just saying, you need to ask the question, why did they spend that kind of money? I can tell you right now, real estate. Real estate has infiltrated the school district. They want Memminger to shut down, to put a hotel there. They want Fraser to shut down, to put development there. If you notice the migration of people from the city to the north area, and the new people moving into Charleston County, they're running out of real estate. So who gets the shaft? The poor people. It happened in Atlanta, Georgia. It happened in Charlotte. Happened in Washington. It happened elsewhere. And
My name is Beverly Gassenbush. This education thing is really, really serious. I worked for Charleston County School District for 23 years. And I've been involved with them another 20-some years since I left. Nothing has changed, it's gotten worse. The problem is we have a system that's a dual education system. And matter of fact, I finished my education up north because my parents saw it and they wanted better for me. And many minority students left the area to be educated because of this dual system. And until they figure this thing out that they can't hurt one without hurting all. And that's where we are right now. The only reason we have people stepping up and they're so interested in education now is because of the people that's moving here, the industries that's relocating here. All of a sudden, everybody is so interested because we're on the bottom. Well, we've always been on the bottom. And our kids, minority kids, have always been on the bottom and have always gotten the rotten deal. And most people who serve on the board, the school district is not good enough for their kids. Their kids always went to private school, but they're sitting on the board making decisions for our kids. You know, they don't have a vested interest in what's going on. It's always been a dual system in Charleston County School District. We've always had 9 school board members, and most of the times you have that 5 to 4 votes. And it's by design. This school district is structured, the finances are structured, the way they allocate money to the school district, that needs to change. We still have schools, for instance, when they had the referendum and they voted for the money for Mount Pleasant gets everything they want, everything. And the north area, these minority schools, if you were to go to some of these schools, it's just, I mean, and go to other states and see other schools and see what these kids are doing, it's just unbelievable. But they have tried so hard to keep certain students down that now we find ourselves in this chaotic situation where now all of a sudden we got the Coalition for Kids, and they're so interested. Where was Mayor Raleigh when we were trying to get the high-tech school over at Rivers? We asked for the entire school. The school was empty. No one was interested until we came forward. And I said I'm talking about the Ministerial Alliance. I took 2.5 years to research all the schools and that was doing high-tech at the time. Because Boeing's, it wasn't Boeing's then, what was the, when they first came in, and I'm saying, we gotta get ahead of this curve. They're going to need workers. But no, this is a tourism city, state, so they need people to make the beds, they need people to work the restaurants. So let's just be real with this. I've been to more meetings than I care to even think about. But yeah, let me get to this.
Okay.
The reason we're in the situation that we're in now is because of the new people that's coming. And the children that has been in the system, they have suffered greatly. And this incident now that we're talking about over at Dunston, that is just deplorable, deplorable. If I was a parent and had a kid over there, I would be so upset. because we don't know who he came in contact with. And for the school district to have sat on this and not even, maybe just put him, you know, somewhere else until they could research or figure out, he should have never been allowed to remain in that school around those children. And then they covered it up. We don't know what happened to those children, and they're still denying that something happened. But they're going to get to the bottom. We're trying to check and find parents. We wrote letters. Matter of fact, I think that's why they're really investigating, because we sent letters to the Attorney General, to the solicitor, to everyone, because we want this case revealed, transparent. We need to know what happened at that school. But because
send those letters so we can get an answer next week from the Attorney General and the rest of those agencies that we send those letters from.
yes, but because of that situation, you can see from that board exactly how they operate. That would have never happened in a in Mount Pleasant. That would have never happened in a majority white school.
Okay, yo, we have a lot to discuss and a lot of emotion. Okay, but I'm gonna try to stick to this agenda, okay? Kevin, before we move from single member districts, are you in favor of single member districts?
Always have been.
Why?
Always have been.
Always have been, okay? That's a huge start.
Somebody
That's a huge
expressed to
start.
me about single member while we were talking about all this afterward that Charleston County is similar in size to the whole state of Rhode Island.
Correct.
And so in someone having to campaign, when you think about the size, you know, it's really, it's so cost prohibitive if you're just an average Joe running, you know, whether you're an educator or not. You know, most people don't have that kind of money to, you know, to do that travel, or, you know, we understand the importance of it, like Kevin was talking about, but, you know, is it feasible, you know, when you actually have a job and family and,
So
you know.
you need more votes to win
Right, yes.
countywide in Charleston than you
Yes.
need in most congressional districts in
Yes.
the country. I mean,
Exactly.
just think about
Yeah.
it.
That's just
We just
crazy.
spent $2 million winning a congressional seat.
Wow.
Think about that.
One more
700
question,
usually
Lloyd,
does
before we move on. I think all of us have this question. If a political PAC spends money, the candidate does not have to report that money?
Right, so South Carolina has some of the most lax ethics laws in the country. Basically, if any LLC or group spends money
Yes,
on
sir.
behalf of a candidate or in any way, they're free to do that. And the candidate doesn't have to report it, they don't have to report it in any way. And they can just spend at will. It's different in federal races. There's more, you know, more restrictions, different in other states. But in South Carolina, you know, if George wants to go spend $2 million getting somebody elected, he can go spend it. He doesn't have to tell anybody he's the one spending it. And the candidate doesn't have to tell anybody that he is the one
Are
spending it.
there requirements for the PAC to report?
Well, it's not
But
a
it's
PAC.
later,
So in
right?
South Carolina, you don't
Okay.
need a PAC. A political action committee is really a federal animal.
Okay.
And federally, they do have to report certain things. In South Carolina, you can just set up an LLC. Just a simple $115 LLC. You can go put $2 million in it and spend it however you want to defeat a candidate or support a candidate. You don't have to report a thing because it's a privately held company. And the candidate doesn't have to report a thing. And that's why you see, you know, again, you know, we have 1, 2, 3 incumbents that reported spending $0, you know.
But don't they have to, they accepted the support of this group, don't they have to acknowledge something?
Well, I can tell you before.
And we
the
saw
meeting-
that actually in Kevin's race. We had a situation where there was independent expenditure, and it was in a flip way, but, and you can speak more about it, but I followed that race closely, but where we had candidates actually saying, no, I don't have anything to do with that group. I'm not aligned with that group. I don't want to be, and I think it was Michael Miller, wasn't it? I mean, you
Yeah,
know
Yeah, it
better
was
than
Michael
me.
Miller
Those Michael Miller.
and that guy came.
The white guy.
Yeah, the West
who
End,
nobody
yeah.
liked. Yeah.
But before we move on,
Okay, this-
and I know, Mr. Willie came up with the answer to our problem. When he recognized that the Consolidated School Board deals with a fixed amount. and the fixed amount is inadequate. We're getting what we're paying for, and that is minimally adequate education. And what he suggested is the answer to our problem. And why I wanted all of the incumbents out, because the incumbents are, by virtue of the power they have, having been elected district-wide, should be going to the legislative delegation, to our state officials and saying, the Education Finance Act of 1977 has never been fully funded. And we're working with inadequate amounts. Serving on the local constituent board on James Island, a relatively affluent area, the maximum amount that goes to per pupil education is $8,500. It's inadequate, and we're losing out there in that relatively affluent community,
Okay.
a third of the kids.
We're going to be addressing that further down with Dr. Dees as far as that's concerned.
Just give me 1 second. So I think the overall solution would be, we gotta get the people in the room. Those who have the ability to vote and can cast a vote, we put them in the room, we talk to them, figure out where they stand, and we just start counting votes. If they say they wanna vote with it, that's okay, cool, we appreciate it. They say they don't, then we gotta find other means to try to put pressure or whatever. So I think at this point, we need to identify who's gonna vote in favor, who's not, and then we start lobbying for our cause. I think that's what the next step is. We gotta, the people who are gonna make that vote, we gotta bring them in the room. And then we make them stand. Are you in favor of this? Yes or no? If you're not, yes or no, and then we'll make our decision what we do moving
But we don't
forward.
even know if they're going to vote though, right? I mean, like
Well-
you were saying, it might be a lawsuit that forces the issue, right?
Well, so what
Yeah,
happens
I'll
is
tell
we,
you
just
one
up to
thing,
them.
and
They just
Kim has a
decide.
point here. I mean,
Yeah,
the
for
fact
sure,
is,
for sure.
if the city members of the school board stood up and said, we want single-member districts, we could get them pretty quickly. I mean, if we had a majority of incumbents and a unanimous would be better. But, those are the kind of things that change it. My guess is we couldn't get a vote for that. Kevin can speak better than anybody
So
because
are you
he
saying
sits with them.
the board or the delegation?
okay, so whoever,
that runs that roof.
okay, hold on, let me answer a question real quick. So whoever makes the final decision, which would more than likely, the delegation would have ultimate power
Sure.
over that. They're the ones we target. If the board doesn't have any, I mean, we could identify who wants to, be an ally, and we can go
Sure.
from there and use their voice to help push the cause, but ultimately they don't have the vote.
Right.
So it comes down to the power of influence. Who can we influence to be on our side when we need to push this agenda? So we go and get them, bring them in the room, talk to them, see where they stand. Can we depend on your vote? Now we start counting votes. So we got to start counting votes. Then when we feel like we have the number to get what we need, then we can put it on the agenda and get the vote.
Then we go that. Okay.
Gotcha.
Could I just ask
Uh,
one more question? Is it the Charleston legislative delegation who
that's confusing.
would make the decision on single, or the whole state?
They'll vote on it, then it goes to the whole
The
delegation.
legislature would have to do it.
Yeah.
I can,
It's a statewide,
No, she's talking
statewide
about
statute on
the
how we
vote
elect
action.
school board members. Now, there's nothing prohibiting certain states or certain counties from doing one way and certain counties doing another, but what I'll tell you is, as we're seeing with the accommodations tax battle that we're dealing with and other counties wanting to join in, it's almost impossible. It has to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
okay. And this is I see there's a lot of interest, so we'll probably look at this and work some more on this. I do know the legislative session starts in January, and I do know that if we want to get this on the agenda, we got a lot of work to do between now and January.
You can get one
to make that
legislator, you can get one legislator to sponsor it. I'm just using
You
an
can get
example.
one legislator
To
to sponsor it.
And then get it on the agenda, but the root of what you're dealing with is hard. Because unless, like, you have the ILA in there, unless Mr. Riley and those guys push, my wingman, and you get Mr. Riley to push, Brother Kempson, and other entities kind of needle, like Roy yourself, needle certain people to kind of move in that direction. you're fighting a mountain lion. The best thing that you can do is start a petition. If you start a petition, that petition represents that person's district, it kind of agitates them, because one of the things the superintendent is doing now is she's pushing for doing away with the constituent board, which I think is crazy.
That's crazy.
And so they're trying to use racism